Chapter 17. The Burrow. The iron door clanged shut behind them, and they were plunged into total darkness. Jenna tried to keep calm and told herself what Silas had always said to her when she was afraid of the dark. Remember, though you can see nothing, no thing can see you. As Jenna was reciting this to herself under her breath, Simon drew something from his pocket and cupped it in his hands. Then he breathed on it, muttering a few words that Jenna could not make out, and his hands began to glow with an eerie green light. "Home, sleuth," said Simon, throwing the object to the ground. A glowing ball of green light bounced away in front of them, illuminating the smooth round tunnel just enough for them to find their way. "Follow me," Simon said sharply to Jenna, his voice echoing in the dark. "Don't bother waste your time looking for a way out. There isn't one. And in case you're wondering where we are, we're in an old burrow." Simon chuckled to himself. "But don't worry, little sister dear. The landworm that lived here has gone." "Landworm?" gasped Jenna. "Yes. If you don't believe me, just reach out and touch the sides of the burrow. Silky smooth from all that lovely worm acid, and still beautifully slimy, too. Nice, huh?" Jenna could not help herself. She had to know if Simon was telling the truth, so she gingerly ran a finger along the rock. It was disgusting, icy smooth and covered with a gluttonous slime that stuck to her finger. She fought down the urge to be sick and wiped her slime-covered finger on Lucy's cloak. It was almost impossible to get the slime off. It seemed to have an affinity with human skin. Holding her finger away from her, Jenna followed Thunder's clattering, slipping hooves as Simon led him through the dark tube of the landworm's burrow. The burrow felt, thought Jenna as she followed the serpentine bends, horribly like walking through the inside of the worm itself. The worm had been a long one, but eventually they reached the end of the slime-lined tube, and Thunder stumbled into a huge round cavern. "This is the worm chamber, where the worm slept in the day and hibernated in the winter," said Simon, catching sight of Jenna's horrified look in the green light of the ball. He continued, enjoying Jenna's expression too much to stop. "If you look at the walls, you can see the different-sized coils of the worm etched into them, all perfectly smooth from the acid, of course." Simon lovingly stroked the side of the cavern, and Jenna noticed that he didn't seem to mind the worm slime at all. "You see, the worm needs somewhere to turn around so that she can get out of the burrow facing the right way, just so that she doesn't miss a tasty morsel like you walking past. She sleeps here until nightfall and then goes out hunting. Just think of all those lovely worms who were curled up in their burrows while we were riding through the quarries this afternoon." Jenna shuddered, despite trying not to. "And over here we have Thunder's stable, don't we, boy?" Simon patted his horse affectionately and led him across the worm chamber to an area covered in straw, with a manger attached to the wall, and a drinking trough hewn from the rock, which was fed by a dripping spring just above it. Simon picked up the green ball and placed it on a ledge in the wall so that the light shone down on the horse and turned him an eerie greenish black. "Make yourself at home, sis," he said, "while I settle Thunder down for the night." He threw Jenna a small rug from one of the saddlebags. Is this where you live?" asked Jenna. She put the rug down on the cavern floor as far away from Simon as she could get, and sat down, trying her best to avoid touching any worm slime. "You think I live here, in this dump? What do you take me for, some kind of loser living like a tramp?" snapped Simon, his suddenly angry voice echoing through the worm chamber. No," stammered Jenna. Simon glared at her coldly, and then, to Jenna's relief, went back to tending his horse, which seemed to calm him down. Jenna watched him take the bridle and the heavy saddle off Thunder and hang them up, and then he rubbed the horse down and covered him with a blanket. Once Thunder was settled, Simon turned his attention back to Jenna and strode over to her. "This, let me tell you," he said, staring down at her, "is just the beginning of my domain. You have no idea just how much I control. No idea at all." Jenna stared at Simon and saw the same mad glint in his eye that he had had when she had turned to look at him in Cutpurse Cut. "Get up," Simon said roughly. "It's time you saw just how powerful your dear brother really is." Jenna hung back. No, thank you, Simon. I'm really tired. You don't think I would let my honored guest sleep in the stable, do you?" Simon grabbed her arm and pulled her up from the rug. "Come," he yelled to the green ball. Sleuth jumped off its ledge and bounced around Simon's feet like an eager puppy. Simon kicked it and sent it flying down the narrow passage that led out of the worm chamber. Then Simon propelled Jenna along in front of him, pushing her roughly down the tunnel. Jenna stumbled along, slipping on the loose shale that covered the ground, until they reached the foot of some steep steps cut into the slate. "Up!" Simon snapped. Sleuth bounced onto the first step and started its climb. Simon gave Jenna a shove. "You two, go on." Jenna stared up the steps. A thick rope was fixed to the wall, and she clung to it as she wearily climbed up and up and up, following the never-tiring ball. Simon was close behind her, and she could hear his breath coming faster as they climbed higher. Soon the air became fresher, and Jenna's spirits lifted a little as she realized that they were going up toward the outside world again. At last Sleuth reached the top step. Simon grabbed Jenna's shoulder. "Wait here," he told her. He kicked the ball away and strode through a tall archway, disappearing into the darkness. Jenna stood at the top of the steps, trembling with cold and tiredness, and drew the cloak around her. She stared into the gloom but could make out nothing at all, though she could feel a few stray raindrops hitting her face. Jenna stuck out her tongue to catch them and taste the fresh air. Simon was back a few minutes later with a glow lamp, a long glass tube stuffed full of writhing glow grubs that he had hastily scooped out of the grub barrel and poured into the tube. Fresh out of the barrel, the glow grubs glowed brightly. Simon beckoned Jenna through the archway, but she hung back. "You can stay out there all night if you want," he told her, "but I wouldn't advise it. There's a magog chamber at the bottom of the steps. Didn't you notice?" Jenna remembered magogs from the time she had met them on board Dom Daniel's ship. Reluctantly, she decided that, yet again, Simon was the better of two evils. Jenna followed Simon through the archway.